It's no use, Dan. It's completely out of control. How'd they take it?
Like me. Scared.
She's in control again.
Welcome to Renaissance Rap. This is Sammy Papert, your co-host. Let me take care of a couple of housekeeping chores before we really dive into our very first show we're both very excited about. This is Slow Talk Radio. You can find us at slowtalkradio.com. And again, this is Renaissance Rap, to be aired every week at 4 p.m. on this same station. I am joined by my co-host, Gary Conway, not only co-host, but Renaissance man himself.
Did you say ghost?
Yeah, coast.
Oh,
No,
ghost.
ghosty co-host.
We said co-host.
Oh,
I
co-host.
said
That's
the
what.
ghost next to me.
I was attempting to do a nice introduction to you, Gary, but I'm gonna be able to resist that temptation right now. Gary Conway.
Thank you. I'm very, very emotional right now.
Well, we're thrilled,
I haven't done so many of these first shows in my life.
and it appears
You see
obvious. It appears
You see
obvious.
how I'm acting now.
Well, we're
I'll get better though.
okay. Good. We'll bring you along slowly but surely. But listen, everyone out there listening, that ever-growing audience, we're thrilled to have you join us. We've got some great guests today. We got a couple to introduce. So Deanna Lund will join us in about 5 or 7 minutes.
And she was, by the way, the gorgeous co-star. Can't say that enough. On Land of the Giants.
Cannot wait to have her
And
join
I
us.
used to have to work with these gorgeous women 12, 14 hours a
The
day.
burden you bore.
Oh,
It's so sad.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the show, we'll wrap up with a good friend and colleague, Stephen Jones, to talk about both his sommelier experience and his perception of a wine event in Los Angeles last week, Garage East. So first of all, Gary, let's cover a couple of basic points for our listeners and our viewers, of course.
Okay.
Renaissance Rap. Tell me
Yes.
about that. Why are we calling that? Calling it by that name?
What happened to me. Do you want me to go into the long version? Or?
Please, if you can abbreviate it, everyone would appreciate that.
All right, because it's pretty long. So I'll do the very quickie version. A few years ago, in the first Paso Robles Film Festival, which was a wonderful film festival at the time, I was picked out as the Renaissance man. So I became the first Renaissance man of Paso Robles.
Wow.
That's pretty nice. The only problem, there hasn't been anyone since.
Uh-oh. There's one
So,
Renaissance man in Paso Robles.
So I don't know if that's good news for me or no one ever cared again. But I love the idea, and I think we've spoken about this, the idea of Renaissance, rebirth. And that's really what this show is going to be about in many ways, a rebirth of who we are and what we know about ourselves. And we'll be covering lots of subjects. Some subjects we know very well, like wine, and others we will learn together with the audience and guests. But that's how Renaissance Rap, and I think it really says a lot, and will say a lot of how we proceed. Also with it, we're calling this the new Land of the Giants. And as you know, Land of the Giants was the most popular TV show in the whole world as the world market. And it became popular in many ways, perhaps mostly in so many countries, because of the metaphor of what Land of the Giants meant and means. And it goes back to Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan Swift, which became a very important book for many philosophers later on. I don't want to get too much into it. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it was very important for him, and he really began all of what we know as the various social systems, from our capitalism to communism to what we have here. So the big and little has been a constant theme, a very important theme, and we're going to carry the theme throughout the show in many areas as we talk to, as we will today, the garagistes, because they happen to be the little guys who are making wine, not the giants who are making wine. So I think it will help us understand and focus in so many of the challenges we have in our society today. So, New Land of the Giants, Renaissance rap.
Got it. And so, what are we going to be expecting? I know we've got a great list of potential candidates. We've got two great ones. What should we expect? You talked about Renaissance and rebirth. Are there other common themes which will be a part of most of our shows?
I think so. And what's wonderful, and I feel inspirational, is we're starting here very local. And that's going to be a constant theme through the show. Local versus, we don't know where this stuff comes from. And we're going to find out in future shows that buying local food may be the way to save your health, because you know where it's coming from and the responsibility of the growers, as opposed to stuff you're buying. We have no idea where it comes from or what they're doing. This is a very important issue. It's important in art. I'm an art major at UCLA, and you'll find the greatest artists, often the ones that inspires the most, and Van Gogh immediately comes to mind, because he was a local artist. He wasn't doing the big murals and the big battles scene. He was local. And we're starting out right here. We're as local as it gets. You can't get more local than this. And I think that's going to be our genius.
And one of the things that, as we were discussing the show and the content and the guests, that resonated with me, and I hope resonates with our listeners, is that while big organizations may dominate our culture and our world, and we hear about them all the time, it's the people that get remembered. It's the small producers, or the small artist, or the small contractor who built a house. It's these guys who we remember after the big corporations are gone, or who do the really significant things historically. It's always a person who we point to.
Right. And as you see, everybody in this town, they've chosen to be in a small local town as opposed to living in L.A. or Orange County or whatever. And that will be, I think we'll find this coursing through everything we begin to talking about. We're expecting a guest, by the way. We should say momentarily, hopefully. It will come through. It gets Deanna Lund. And it'll be fun to talk to her going back to the giant fighting day, but we'll find out shortly.
And when we say expecting her, she's calling in. She's not with us in the studio, but I'll challenge you to tell the difference between calling in and actually being here, because the technology is that good. But until Deanna arrives, let's talk about a couple of more things. Gary, people may know that you make wine, and that you told them that you're an artist and art history major, and you're one of the true Renaissance men. That's a group of apparently one from Paso Robles.
That's why Renaissance rap.
I get it. I'm a slow study, but I get it.
I want to reiterate.
Let's tell our viewers how we originally connected. It's a fun story. When I first visited the Central Coast, it was in 2001. We came here on a wine tasting trip. We wanted to taste wines from the Paso Robles appellation. We had rented a house over on the coast, and the very first day in the vineyards, we drove into Carmenite by Night. Had not heard of it at the time. So again, 2001. Beautiful sign out front, and we drove in and went to the tasting room. It's a fantastic property with a beautiful setting, fantastic pond. Then had the pleasure of meeting Gary and his wife, Marion Conway.
Was it really a pleasure? I know you're saying that.
Well, because we met Marion.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's how we originally met. And obviously we didn't become business partners and friends right off the bat. You're kind of tough to get to like. But indeed, that's when we met, right?
Right. When we discussed that part, too. And I said, in time,
it's
we might become friends.
Yeah. You grow on people.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it's not like an amoeba. You got to be careful. But what was I found interesting and fascinating about your involvement, that you immediately understood how different we were, and in that difference, again, are discussions that will take quite a bit of our time to cover. The difference being that you are walking into a natural vineyard. Natural vineyard. People talk about that. What's a natural vineyard? And a lot of folks who even will discuss wine, experts on wine, can't define that. Well, it's definable. And you picked up on that right away. And when you decided to make wine, you wanted to make real wine from the grape that's been around for 90,000 years. They call it on their own root. But it's the natural vine. Now, our society, for whatever, decided to get away from that. And that'll be subject matter that we will zero in on and try to get answers, because that subject actually leads the way to the giants who are now telling even people growing grapes, which is as natural as anything can be, going back to cavemen. No, you can't grow it the way Mother Nature presented. You're going to have to grow it the way we are going to give it to you, which is going to be a genetic modification. So anyway, you picked up on that great-made, phenomenal wine. And part, by the way, will be deal with the Garagis discussion later on.
Right.
I understand you were down there with your wine.
Correct.
A natural one. And by the way, I mean, I'm going to be frank about this. We may be the only two guys around who are actually making non-GMO wine. How about that? Maybe a couple of those infidel guys out there, I'd like to hear from them.
Sure.
But we're making non-GMO wine. Now, when you go in the market today and you even pick up peanut butter or whatever you pick up, it'll say non-GMO. You're going to buy the peanut butter because it says non-GMO, but you look around the wine shelves, I don't see that. What's the deal? I wonder.
Very hard to find.
What's going on? Anyway, we might find out through this program.
And so, since you alluded to it, and until Deanna joins us, let's. I've got to share the story. So Gary and Marion and I met. Cheryl and I met them in 2001 and became friends. We didn't move to this part of the world. We moved to Cambria in 2009, and it was probably 2006 or 7 when we first talked about making wine, making an additional label, and me doing so. And I said, for Pete's sake, Gary, I live in Texas. I'm not going to do that. It's not going to happen. But then flash forward 2009, you nudged me in the ribs and said, you live here now. Let's revisit this notion. And indeed, we are now partners. I make a little bit of wine from what I think is the single best source in the California.
And it's very important. We are in the consummate wine country, and that we've learned over a period of time. Now, I placed the first natural vine in the ground along with Justin. I'd sold part of my property to Justin. We're the first to do that on the west side. I did that well over 30 years ago. 30 years ago. That's a long time.
When did you actually plant your vines?
It was about 32 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah. And at that point, now I hope the audience understands this, becomes very very important. So that because if we're messing up with wine and natural wine, what about our food? Are we messing up on that too? So that's going to become a parallelism that we will cover. But you picked up on that, and you felt that the way wine had been made for 8,000 years is probably something we shouldn't abandon in 8 minutes or 8 days or 8 months, and that's what we have done. And again, we will go into all the ramifications of this subject. But I'll tell you one thing which the audience should know, is that at that time when we planted, there was no such thing as a genetic modified vine. Right. So wherever you plant in California, you're planting on your own root. And the Zinfandel vineyards, by the way, that we revere around here, go back to that time also, but they kept going with it. They don't, Zinfandel does not bother having genetic modified Zinfandel.
Got it. So let me take a quick break just to take care of a piece of business. Just to remind listeners that we are at slowtalkradio.com. You're listening to Renaissance Rap. It'll be aired every Thursday at 4 p.m. We hope that if you like what you're hearing, and it's almost impossible for us to believe you don't, that you'll spread the word and grow this audience and become a part of what we think is something very, very special.
And by the way, I want to say, because I get very passionate about this, a lot of what we're talking about is life and death.
Understood.
I mean, what's more important than that? And I don't think you'll find the information you're going to hear on the show anywhere else. And if you do, let me know, because I'd like to listen in on that conversation. Everything we're going to be talking about here is something you can't find in the media. I look for it all the time. As a for instance, in the future, we'll just define what would be, let's say, the most important thing that if you were an Aborigine, you'd want to know. What is a healthy food? What should I be taking in my body? Because that's all they at one point cared about. I will ask the audience, can you define what a healthy food is? And if you can, call in, because I like to hear your definition. Most people don't know. And if there's one single thing we should all know, and that's because the most important thing we can do is take care of ourselves and our wives and our children and our family. That's the most important thing. And if we don't even know how to eat something that's healthy, what do?
Terrific. Well, looks like we've got Deanna. So if you'll hang on a second, why don't you do a quick intro to Deanna, and then I'll patch her in, Gary.
Well, I also want to say, before we do it, I had asked Deanna. I think that's why she was slightly late. I wanted her when she called in. We'll see if she does. She was going to call in screaming. And then she was going to be the scream. She was going to work. The Giants are coming.
Okay, are you ready for that?
But no, I talked to Brad about it, and he thought that would confuse the audience, and maybe somebody driving would have a problem.
Okay,
but I thought it would be fun, because that's what we're supposed to have. Anyway, Deanna, are you there?
Deanna, are you there? Yes. Can't.
We're not hearing it. We're not hearing from the lovely Deanna at the moment.
You hit answer. You hit the answer button and it's not coming through.
Oh.
Hello?
Deanna, are you there?
Well.
Sammy, is that you?
Oh, we got Stephen. Hey, Stephen.
Stephen,
well, I thought you might be taken aback by the deep voice as opposed to Deanna's voice.
Stephen, Deanna just morphed into you,
which pleases us to no end. I mean, we missed Deanna, so Stephen, welcome and thank you for joining us.
We had her set up. We had these gorgeous pictures of her, but if you want, we'll put them up and pretend she is you now with a deep voice. Or not, maybe.
Well, I can guarantee she's much more attractive than I am, so please keep her pictures up.
Yeah, okay.
So Stephen, listen, despite our ineptitude up here, we're glad you joined us. Thank you for calling in from L.A., and as I mentioned before we queued you up, we really were interested in a couple of things while we're on the air with you. First of all, your pursuit of your sommelier credentials, can you give us a couple of minutes on that? I just think it's fascinating that there are so few in the world, and you're well on your path to that. So tell us about your sommelier pursuit.
Well, I'm actually currently in the advanced level 3 for the Wine Spirit Education Trust. In fact, I just finished going through writing up an essay on the differences between the 4 different wine styles in Valpolicella, Italy. So it goes into great detail on not only the styles of wines in terms of their aromas and tastes and flavor profiles and so on, but also into the specific details involving wine production that create the differences in the end product. So it's detailed. It's a lot of study time, and we'll get finished up here. I think it's mid-September. I'll finish up with this level and then pursue level 4.
You know, it's always interesting
Wow.
to me, Stephen, as I think you know, I was an art history major. And I have discussed this often. I said, there is really no understanding of art. People say, well, I like it, I don't like it. That's really not understanding art until you or the viewer make a commitment to understanding, to some degree, the history of art, how all these movements came about, how these people came about. Either you're willing to do that or not. If you're not willing to do that, you will never really appreciate or understand art. Same thing with music. I am a musician, play the violin at the Hollywood Bowl in orchestras, and the same thing happens now in wine, though it's very different. Our wine culture never talks about history. It always talks about a wine winning something or tasting like something. Give us your thoughts on that, how important it is, as you've just explained, going back to know the history of wine, to really understand wine and then enjoy it.
Well, I think it's important to remember that wine, in its history, it was a food staple. You know, a lot of times we look at it here in the Western world as simply as an alcoholic beverage. But where in Europe, in Italy, and in Greece, the Mediterranean diet it included wine. It was something that they had. I don't know if they had it 3 meals a day. Gary, you're got an Italian family. You could probably tell me about breakfast.
Right? And wine. Well,
I know it was definitely part of lunch and dinner.
And wine for Sicilians, Italians, and French is life. I said that earlier, life and death. Was life and death. If you didn't have wine, you were probably going to die. And Thomas Jefferson couldn't have made it to Europe without wine on board.
Yeah.
By the way, we're going to be somewhat limited, and we're keeping our theme, Big and Little Giants. We understand both you guys were at the Garagiste.
Yeah, so
I'd like to hear about
let me run with that for just a second. For those who aren't familiar with the Garagiste, there is a festival that is held in Paso Robles. The original Garagiste festival is in Paso Robles. There's now an event in Solvang annually and one in Los Angeles, Greater Los Angeles annually. And by definition, a Garagiste wine producer is 1,000 cases or less. So from the consuming side of the table, you are getting a chance to taste wines that there are usually no tasting rooms. There's very, very limited production. Almost inevitably, the wine or the grapes or juice is sourced from another source. It is just some of the most innovative, fun, supportive group of business people and passionate winemakers you will ever meet. We poured this past weekend. My label.
Is that because they're little guys fighting the giants?
Well, that's part of it, but they're helpful because
giants don't get passionate.
Yeah, they don't get. It's a business. This is a passion first, and perhaps the passion becomes a business. And we poured this weekend in Santa Monica. There were 50 wineries from Paso and from Napa. And Stephen was there tasting. I don't know. I was too dang busy, thankfully. But Stephen, your reaction to the Garagiste winemakers and the event, what did you come away with?
Well, I think you mentioned it already, Sammy. It's the passion. These are people that are making wine as you are, out of the passion for wine, for making something. Some of them really trying to set out to do something different. There was a gentleman that had a Pinot that he was serving that was no time spent on the skin, so it was white. It was a white wine, but it's a Pinot Noir. Just, and varying folks around. There was grapes producers there from, as you mentioned, Paso Robles. There were some from Santa Barbara. There were some that were there that had produced estate wines from the Antelope Valley and some from Agoura Hills, even in the Conejo Valley. So it was very interesting to me to see the various areas of California that they came from.
And I like the idea of the Garagiste suggesting they make their wine in the garage, which, by the way, is not the best place to be making wine. But what's interesting, every artist I know, including myself, the garage was always the studio. My first studio was a garage, and most artists use the garage for the studio, so it's a great carryover. But I wouldn't suggest they should be making their wine in the cellar. But in the West Coast, it's hard to get
Well,
cellars.
I don't think they're making it
Garages are
actually
easier.
technically in the garage, but
That's right.
Well, and I gather that in France the term garagiste is a somewhat disparaging term. It's you small fry, even though some of the most well-known and expensive wines in the world come from very, very small
Well,
producers.
that's a very important point about giants, little
That's
people. The 200, and Stephen will tell you this too. Top wines, the ones most revered, are all small.
Yeah.
They're small guys, and they somehow have kept their ability to create, prosper, and somehow still fight the giants, which
Yeah.
I'm an expert in, by the way.
yes.
Understood. Well, we'll continue to fight the giants. Stephen, any last-minute thoughts from your world before we begin to wrap up our inaugural show?
Well, I would just say that if anybody listening has not been to a Garagiste festival, that the one coming up in Paso Robles in November is definitely a worthwhile afternoon.
Absolutely.
Super. Well, thank you very much
Thanks,
for
Stephen.
joining us,
Right.
Stephen,
Appreciate
and
the words.
have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care. And to that end, by the way, let me just briefly mention, I looked on the calendar. I'm pretty sure the weekend of the November Garagiste is the weekend of November 10th and 11th. If you search for garagistefestival.org, I believe, maybe it's .com, you will find it pretty dang easily.
And hopefully, by the way, one thing as we talk about this, and I'd like to have our audience challenge it, when you talk to a garagiste, the most important conversation again is they say the derivation, the land. Ask them about genetic modified vine. What are they doing about it?
Yeah.
Do they have ideas on this? It's very important, I think, that we challenge these most creative, most independent people, because I want to be sure, too, they are doing the right thing. And we're going to have a lot of conversation about this.
Cool.
Believe me.
Since you've mentioned it several times, I've alluded to it several times. My ego requires me to say, for those who don't know, my wine is Caldera Cuvée. I haven't said it yet, but that's not why we're here. But I've got to tell you, folks,
Absolutely.
make a couple hundred cases almost every
Well,
year, kind of as needed.
And you just had the mention in the LA Times a week or so ago. The only one mentioned.
Yeah,
loved it.
wonderfully, it was mentioned by LA Times.
And
in
by
their
the way,
travels.
people, remember this. This is the most important thing you will ever hear from anyone, okay? Right now you're going to hear it. Doesn't have chemicals in it to screw up your brain. Listen closely on that. He makes a true natural wine.
Thank you, and proud to do so and partner with you on this endeavor. So, Gary, we're about to wrap up. Our producers.
Wait a minute. I have another half hour.
I know you've got plenty of
Oh, my
material,
God. If I knew this.
and I promise not to listen to you as I walk out of the studio this afternoon. But
I have my guitar. I was going to sing something towards the end here.
I'm
Very
gonna
meaningful.
stifle you. There's a muzzle on there. My hands are around your neck if that's what it takes. But indeed,
As long as they're around my neck.
last minute comment. If not, I think I'm going to get the high sign from our producer to. Well, you don't even get any last minute comments. Let me just wrap things up and first of all tell everyone, thank you for joining us. It's been a thrill to have you here. This is Renaissance Rap. This is SlowTalkRadio.com. Welcome to what's going to be fun, enjoyable, and awfully entertaining.
And join in with us.
All right.
And let's hear your ideas, too.
Goodbye, all. See you next week.
Bye-bye.